Well, it was super nice of the Cincinnati Reds to welcome the Chicago Cubs back into the division race. By the way, thanks for joining us here in this Locked On Reds, Locked On Cubs crossover. I'm Jeff Carr. Alongside me is my co-host Steve Offenbaker, and joining us here today, and we are joining him, Sam Olber, one half of the Locked On Cubs podcast. He is most undoubtedly the most happiest of the three of us here today because, well, it was 3 days of butt kicking for the Chicago Cubs over the Cincinnati Reds. We are going to get into why the Reds have welcomed the Chicago Cubs back into the division race. We're going to look at some impressive performances. There were a few Reds that I want to point out, and some guys that I think, one guy in particular I think might be breaking out before our very eyes. And we're going to look ahead, because there are still a few games between the Reds and Cubs left at Great American Ballpark coming up here in a few weeks. And then there's lots of other stuff happening as well. Thank you so much, though, for making Locked On Reds and Locked On Cubs part of your day. And if you're an everydayer, please let us know down in the comment section. Really appreciate having our everydayers along. And Sam, everydayers will know, coming into this series, we were feeling pretty good. I know that the Cubs were feeling really good, and they continue to be hot through this series. But as Reds fans, we were feeling pretty good about the series. Not so much right now.
Yeah, I mean, from a Cubs perspective, I mean, they were rolling, right? So they came out of the break. They lost 2 out of 3 to Boston. Then they won 2 out of 3 against Washington. Lost the first game against St. Louis, and they went on an 8-game winning streak, which was the longest they've had since they won the World Series in 2016. And it was all kind of driven by the offense. Cody Bellinger won Player of the Month in July, and then everybody around him was kind of hitting. So, Cubs fans, I think, we all went into this series knowing, I don't think you go into a series with a first-place team and assume you're going to win 3 out of 4, but we felt really good about it. And then the deadline comes, and we trade for Candelario, which was like maybe 2 hours, something like that, before first pitch Monday. Right. So the vibes were really good. And then that first game was really tough. It was a 1-run game, which, when you look at the Reds and Brewers versus the Cubs, and you look at why the Cubs have trailed them for most of the season, it's because of close games. The Reds are really good in them. The Brewers are really good in them, and the Cubs are terrible. They're 16-24 after tonight's win. So you lose one of those games, and you're like, well, now you kind of just hope you split. And then the fireworks started, and then they were able to grind one out in Game 4. But it was definitely a series that I think we both felt good about it going in, and the home team was able to just get 3 of them.
Yeah, we're feeling pretty rough, Steve.
Yeah, I am so frustrated because this team goes to the West Coast, takes the series from the Dodgers at home,
2 out of 3,
and then just lays a big old turd in the Windy City. And there's no other way to put that. This was an opportunity to really create some distance, keep it a 2-horse race, put the Cubs not quite out of sight, but set them back enough that you didn't have to worry about them as much. And instead, now we're in a 3-team race. The Cubs are on fire. They're climbing the ladder, and we're relying on teams like the freaking Washington Nationals to help keep us relevant right now. This is just not okay. It's very frustrating to me that we continue to beat teams like the Dodgers and then can't do anything with the National League Central. And it has to be motivating, invigorating, exciting for Sam and for the fan base of the Cubs and for the Chicago Cubs to really recognize that, hey, we're in this. And, and I applaud the Cubs for going out and making some moves at the deadline and saying, hey, don't forget about us, because I'll tell you what, they sure showed us over the last 3 days that we cannot forget about them, or they're just going to blow right past us.
Right.
No, and I think, too, there was something about the Cubs in the preseason that I looked at, and I thought they had enough talent to be a contending team. And they went through quite a stretch there at the beginning of the summer, right around Memorial Day, where it just kind of seemed like the wheels were falling off this team and they had no hope. But they've got the talent to come back out of that sort of a doldrums. The Reds do have talent as well, and I feel like we're going to see that talent kind of figure some things out over the next couple of weeks here. The biggest issue for me is that the Reds couldn't lose that game on Thursday. Thursday's game was the chance for the Reds to kind of put those two blowout losses behind him. 20-9 and 16-6 is something insane. And
Bears-Bengals.
Yeah, like we're talking about football scores at that point. And when you look at Thursday's game, the Reds had opportunities galore, and you can look at the human element and say, well, they're tired. They got a 10-game road trip. They're about to come home. They're feeling like they just want to sleep in their own beds for a night. That might be true, but you can't lose that game. And it was so frustrating to watch the Reds' performance because, yes, Luke Weaver stunk in the third inning after Luke Maile couldn't catch strike 3 on Nico Horner.
What a random play.
And watching that replay, I don't know what clump of dirt that thing hit, but my goodness, it bounced. But it was like after that point, Luke Weaver couldn't throw a strike to save his life. And you just look at that and you just like, who do I blame here? Who do I want to blame? And I think there's just sometimes that the universe is against you in the game of baseball, and the universe was against the Reds for 3 straight days, and that's why everyone in the city of Cincinnati wants to wring someone's neck about the way that the Reds have been playing. Yeah,
it's funny because, Steven mentioned the NL Central stuff with the Reds, and then Jeff, you mentioned Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day weekend's when you guys came and just blew the doors off of us at Wrigley Field. And that was when Cubs fans, or at least myself, was like, okay, not only are we in trouble, but look, these guys might be, better than us. I mean, that came, and that was before Ellie even came up, right? And I remember that. I mean, my thing with the Cubs and Reds, when I look at them and I look at this series, because we do have, I think we got a 4-gamer at Great America because we've only played twice there because we had that rain out.
Doubleheader.
Yeah. What I look at is for me, and this is just coming from an outsider and somebody that's not close to the team, is I just couldn't believe they didn't add a starter because I believe that and the Cubs right now are red hot, so it's it's easy to say that they have the best offense, but I think the Reds have the best offense in the division. I mean, when you face them, and the thing that makes them so tough is they have guys for just every side. So you have your Senzel against lefties and your Fraley against righties, and they do a really good job of just keeping those guys in positions to succeed, and they're really tough. And I noticed it during the 2 blowout games, like they don't give away at bats at all. But coming from the Cubs side, after Abbott, we looked at that series. We're like, okay, Lively, we probably can handle. Williamson was throwing the ball better, but he's not a guy that makes you shake in your boots. And then, Weaver, like you said, he's actually throwing the ball well today. That was crazy, by the way. On the Cubs broadcast, they had a stat out that he had like an 8-something ERA, and the Reds were like 9-1 in those games.
Yep. Yeah, his first quality start. So he pitches.
How funny is that?
It was like almost 10 straight games where I think they only lost 1 game, and he couldn't get anybody out. He gave up a ton of runs, and then he goes for a quality start against the Dodgers, and they lost that game. And it was just like, what is baseball is such a weird sport. But kind of to your point, talking about the pitching thing, like that's something that has divided Reds country over the last couple of days. And you want to talk about nuclear, how quickly it's gone wrong. Every single pitcher that was acquired at the deadline, their first start or their first appearance with their new team, they looked like Cy Young.
Right.
And the Reds are sitting here getting barely any pitching from anybody for the last 3 days, and you're just like, my gosh, I understood the front office's reasoning for not going out and getting because the value was not right. But you still have to figure something out with this pitching staff. You still can't run out what you've been running out for this last month.
Green and Lodolo, are they gonna? They'll be back. That's gonna be kind of their
right. So Hunter Green's, Hunter Green's probably 2 to 3 weeks away. Nick Lodolo is probably 3 to 4 weeks away.
Okay,
and I
so
think,
that's their fall.
To your point and to Jeff's point, I'm okay that they didn't go trade for a starter and spend prospect capital to do that. But for me, it's starting to be almost criminal that you keep running Luke Weaver out there with those numbers. And I know they're aberrations and there's weird statistics buried within there, but there's a couple guys in AAA right now for the Reds, and Lyon Richardson and Connor Phillips, that I think either one of those guys today, this minute, right now, day one, are better than Luke Weaver, probably better than Ben Lively. So I think the Reds front office has been slow to adjust to this pennant race mindset. And I think things are now further complicated, Sam, with what the Cubs are doing and just how red stinking hot you guys are. Because I'm not quite sure, what the answer in dealing with you guys is if you can continue to score runs in bunches like you did on Tuesday and Wednesday. There's not a whole lot you can do with that. And I know that first start was Ben Lively, and basically David Bell left him out there until his arm fell off. That second game, that was pretty much all of our top-notch relievers except for Alexis Diaz. You guys roughed up everyone we have had and relied on for the entire season and didn't look like you broke a sweat doing it. And that's concerning to me with the surge that you've got in this division right now.
Right. And I want to get to that coming up next because there's a group of guys when it comes to the top of the Cubs lineup and then also the bullpen that just really, really impressed me over this series. We'll get to that here in just a moment. Before we do, though, I want to get to today's sponsor, and that is eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check, and you'll know that every part will fit right away or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop at eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, get the right fit, get the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And thanks for making Locked On Reds and Locked On Cubs your first listen every single day. Big series coming up this weekend for both teams. Cubs got to keep staying hot and Reds got to get right. You can be sure to catch every pitch of the hometown broadcast for the Reds and the Cubs on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Reds or Cubs. All right, Sam, we were kind of getting into this because it was a dominating performance in Game 2, a dominating performance in Game 3, and really I thought even on Thursday, even though they didn't score at the same volume, the top 4 hitters of the Cubs lineup right now really look to be settling into a huge groove.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, it's been kind of insane, right? It started with Bellinger. He was really the first guy, to just explode, right? So he had a good start to the season. And then he got injured in Houston and he missed about a month. Then he came back. And when he came back, he was hitting, but it was a lot of dinky bloops and it felt like a little bit lucky. And then once the calendar hit July, he just became, since July 1st, the best hitter in the National League. And I just think Tauchman's been huge, kind of a journeyman guy who just they've slotted in the leadoff hole, who has gotten on base at a really high clip, sparked things. And the Cubs have the tendency to do this, though. This isn't the first time this season. This is the most, the most obvious example. They started out the year 12-7. They were crushing the ball, right? Then they had a really good stretch in June where they won like 9 of 11 and they were crushing the ball. This year, it's been when things go well for them, everything goes well. That's why they have like a +78, +79 run differential, which is, third best in the National League. The problem is it's been a lot of feast or famine. So when it doesn't go well, they all start to struggle at the same time. So, to Steven's earlier point about, should you fear the Cubs? It's all about sustainability. Who's going to be able to, step up when Cody Bellinger comes back down to earth inevitably. But yeah, it's been Tauchman, it's been Bellinger. Horner's had a resurgence since Dansby's come back from the IL. He's been great. And then Christopher Morel is starting to grow and learn how to take pitches. I thought his at bat Thursday night where he went 0-2 to 4-2 was probably the biggest at bat of the game.
Yes. No, 100%. And I thought that, his bomb was an important one as well for his psyche, just kind of getting right there with that one. I think too, And just to kind of stick to what impressed me about the Cubs for just another moment,
Yeah.
I know that early on in the season, the bullpen was a huge question mark.
Huge.
Did they cut the fat? Is that what's going on here? Like, because they were nails in this series.
Yeah, so early in the year, they kind of just messed up out of camp, right? So it was supposed to be Keegan Thompson, Brad Boxberger, and Michael Fulmer. That was supposed to be your 7, 8, 9. Michael Fulmer is now a middle reliever that faces righties exclusively. Brad Boxberger's been on the IL since like May, you know, one of those type of injuries. We're not really sure what's going on. And Keegan Thompson's in Iowa. So they kind of were forced to, you know, change that on a whim, and it's turned into Merriweather with righties late in the game. Mark Leiter Jr., who's a reverse split guy, so he gets lefties. That's why you saw him come in for Votto and come in for Benson and those guys. And then Alzolai's kind of, you know, Leiter Jr. has been an unsung hero. They actually got rid of him in order to sign Eric Hosmer, but nobody else claimed him, so he came back. And they got him on like a minor league deal, and now he's been as good as anybody. And then Alzolai's become the closer. I still don't think the Cubs have as good of a bullpen as Cincinnati or Milwaukee, because, you know, as good as Adbert is, he's not at the level of Williams or Diaz. Williams, of course, Devin Williams with the Brewers. But it is now not a major problem. It's not a hole, right?
Right. And that's kind of been the key for the Reds all year, is having a very stable bullpen. And Steve, it really kind of felt like we saw a lot of warts in the bullpen this series.
You know, I'm trying to decide if I want to be concerned that this is a symptom of the overuse and a symptom of the amount of innings they've been asked to cover and the amount of times they've been asked to bail out horrendous starting pitching, or if I want to go down the lane of they just caught a really red hot Cubs team. And I'm leaning more towards they just caught a really red hot Cubs team. I want to see how they bounce back now in this next series coming back home. If things settle, because I mean, if we're being honest, if the Reds won yesterday, if they split the series, this would be a whole different conversation. We talk about, 36 runs in 2 games with 12 home runs and our backup catcher pitching on back-to-back nights. And we talk about that.
It's just 2 wins.
Laugh and laugh, but it's just 2 games. It's different now that you won this series, took 3 in a row. And, you know, we're going back to Great American Ballpark licking our wounds a little bit. So the narrative is a little bit different. I think I'm not going to push the panic button yet. I like what I'm seeing from Mole. We picked him up from Oakland. He looked good in his debut for the Reds.
That's slider, man.
I like.
He struck out Cody Bellinger.
He did, and with some decent looking pitches. So I think he helps this bullpen. I think that if they take a breath and can just survive for 2 more weeks for Hunter Green to help stabilize the rotation.
Sure.
That goes a long way. But in order to do that, you know, we circle back around, right? We talk about what can the Reds do? Well, they can get Luke Weaver out of this rotation today. He should never start another game for the Reds. Lyon Richardson, Connor Phillips, Jeff Carr, I don't care who it is, just start somebody else, because they're going to be hard pressed to put anybody else out there that's worse. That's not going to have the same level of success. We want to put a positive spin on it. The same level of success that Luke Weaver has had in each of his starts. So you've got to try something different. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We have seen we're not going to get a different result from Luke Weaver, and it's time to make a change if the Reds want to remain relevant in this division and in this pennant race.
Let me slide in one quick thing, Jeff. Sorry. I just want to say this from a Cubs perspective, because Jeff and I actually had this like a very similar crossover, and I think it was like almost a year ago to the day, and it was really hot, and it was Wrigley Field, and I tell I tell you the Reds fans listening, it's really hard to pitch here on these type of nights. It's been really hot, really muggy, wind howling out, and Wrigley overall, it's a pitcher's park for most of the year when it's cold, but on nights like tonight and nights like this week, I'm not sure. It didn't really matter who was pitching for either team. Like from the Cubs perspective, Justin Steele got hit around, Stroman got hit around. Unless you're just missing bats, it just felt like to me it was one of those weeks. If I were the Reds, obviously there's concerns with guys like Weaver, but in terms of your bullpen and guys like that, I wouldn't overreact to one weird week at Wrigley where there's 80 billion home runs.
And I'll take that. I can live with the Cubs just outclassed the Reds. I can live with that because we said all year long, and we were not expecting the Reds to be in this position this late into the season anyway, but we were expecting lots of, frustration and lots of heartache, but we were expecting fun times as well. We've gotten all of that. So I think that there's a lot of folks, and honestly for me, because I was getting very mad over the last 3 nights, I need to pull it back a little bit, need to calm down, because there's still plenty of game left. There's still plenty. Yes. Zen. Because there was also some good stuff too. I mean, and the number one good thing that I saw is that Christian Encarnacion-Strand is breaking out. I mean, he was 7 for 16 in this series, looking absolutely fantastic at the plate, making good contact. He wasn't hitting the ball out of the park. He wasn't hitting the ball for extra base. He had like 2 doubles, and that's it. And everything else was singles. But before that, we were kind of wondering. We're like, man, what's this guy's, plate discipline like? What's his hitting acumen? And I think we've seen it begin to break out a little bit. I'm expecting some power this weekend against Washington. I think that CES is going to uncork a few homers, and we're all going to go, oh, because like I was reading some stuff earlier on today that it was just like we were spoiled by Matt McClain and Ellie De La Cruz and their debuts, that when CES came up and didn't just go insane for the first 3 or 4 games, we're all like, is he good? Is he going to make it? He's good.
Flop.
He's fine.
He's a flop.
He's going to be just fine. But I'll say this. There's lots left in this season. And when you've got a half game between the Brewers and the Reds, and now it's 2 games separating, 2.5 games separating the Cubs and the Brewers, it's now definitely a 3-team race, and there's still plenty of season for these 3 teams to figure out who it is. We are going to kind of dive into what's going to happen moving forward coming up next. Before we talk about that, though, want to let you know you can catch every pitch of the Reds and Cubs hometown broadcasts on Sirius XM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Cubs or Reds. And in between episodes, you can get even more Reds and Cubs content. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. You can follow, or X, whatever you call it. You can follow Steve at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs. You can follow me at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs for your Reds content. For your Cubs content, Sam's a great follow. And I was about to say your Twitter handle, and I totally forgot what it is.
I think it's just at Sam Olber.
At Sam Olber, because
creativity is key in Chicago.
Yeah, we thought hard about that one.
I mean, between you guys, like you guys actually have names where you could have Twitter handles be your names. I had to add my middle initial in for mine to get my name. So there's that.
So well, Jeff, before we get into the preview of what's coming up, before we go down that road, we had a little conversation kind of start when we were getting set to record, and I want to revisit it for just a minute because I thought it was an interesting conversation, and that's talking about the managers within the National League Central. So before we get into where we think things are going to go from here, let's talk about the managers, specifically Craig Counsell in Milwaukee, David Ross in Chicago, and of course our guy David Bell here in Cincinnati. And I think we're all unanimous in agreement that we think, as far as overall managing ability, in-game decision making, running a team, we think that Craig Counsell is the class of the division. Are we all on the same page with that?
Absolutely.
100%.
So that being said, let's compare and contrast David Bell and David Ross a little bit, because these are going to be the 2 teams trying to power their way into the top of this division and stay there. And I have long said that I felt like David Bell likes to tinker, likes to, like, I always make the joke about he's one of those guys that's like, I don't know what to do with my hands. I need to be doing something. I don't know what to do. And then he starts doing things, and you want him to just chill sometimes, but it doesn't always work out that way. I will say this: David Bell is the best arguer in the entire division. There is not a guy in baseball that gets thrown out better than David Bell. And he was so hot yesterday and flustered. He lost his hat twice and running ring around the rosy at home plate to keep getting back in the home plate umpire's face. That's the kind of fire I want to see from my manager when he gets a run from a ballpark.
Yeah. I think David Bell is a better manager than David Ross. I am kind of infamous for my criticism of David Ross. And, I just think to me, and I could be wrong on this, but to me, when your underlying numbers are as good as the Cubs are, I mean, we're talking about a team. We're talking about a team that and run differential's not everything. It has its holes, but you're talking about a team that's outscored the Reds and Brewers this year, I believe, after tonight, like in the high 80s and 90s, and you're you're trailing both teams, and you're that bad in close games, and there's been so many games where, and it's not just me, it's everybody. Why isn't this guy in questionable lineups? I mean, for example, just really quick, on Monday night, we played Cincinnati, which was a huge game for the Cubs. Huge, right? They lost, but it was a huge game. They had Seiya Suzuki batting second, which has been something that shouldn't be happening for a very long time, and Trey Mancini playing. The next day, Trey Mancini got DFA'd. and Seiya Suzuki got kind of publicly benched versus righties. And I just said to myself, if that was going to happen 24 hours later, why waste the game against the team that we're chasing that's worth 2 games? Just little marginal things like that. Matt and I on the show always talk about the margins, and we just don't feel like the Cubs are very good on them. So, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of David Ross. Obviously, everybody's going to look good managing when you're scoring 20 runs. I don't think he's a terrible manager, and I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good leader. They play hard for him. But when we're talking about in terms of the hierarchy with the 3 teams, I would say Counsell, Bell, and Ross. That would be my take.
I think that what puts David Bell ahead of David Ross is that he really understands what it means to be a player's manager. I think most managers would say that they are players' managers, that they love their players and that they would do whatever it takes for their players. But when it comes to setting the lineup, when it comes to managing the bullpen and putting guys in certain situations to succeed, that's really where the rubber meets the road. And I think that, kind of watching from afar, it feels like David Ross has trouble struggling with that. The 2 things there of like, I'm a player's guy, but also I'm trying to win and I'm trying to be analytical and all this other stuff. And it feels like he kind of does part of both. And, it's like the old Ron Swanson quote, don't half-ass 2 things, whole-ass 1 thing. And I think you either got to be a player's manager or you got to be like analytical with just, being an understanding type manager. And I think that David Bell does a really good job of incorporating other aspects of managing into who he is. But I think that is the hilarious part of watching him argue, like watching what he did with the umpires in this finale. And then if you ever watch a post-game interview with David Bell, you're like, where the heck did that dude go? Because he'll set up in front of a camera. We really competed, man. It was a really good game out there.
They never give you anything in those.
No. And I know that's their job. They don't want to be, don't want to, draw attention to themselves, but it's just like, give us just a little bit of something. Like, I feel like, and we've made this joke before on the podcast, but just in case anybody haven't heard that, I feel like one day, hopefully, the Reds win the World Series and David Bell's the manager when they do it. And David Bell after that game is going to be like, man, we went out and we competed really well and are really proud of our guys. It was a really good thing.
On to the next one. On to the next one.
Yeah, like, dude, David, there are no more. You just want it. Yeah, it's. But I think you're right. I think it's Craig Counsell. It's a gap, and I think that we've advocated for it, and I think especially if the Reds win the division, David Bell should win NL Manager of the Year. But I think on a consistent talent base, I do think Craig Counsell is up at the top.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, let's talk about these teams just a little bit more, Jeff, because I'm curious the answer to this question. Looking at it now, we're bunched together, the 3 teams, the Brewers, the Reds, and the Cubs, pretty bunched together. So, Sam, I would ask you, and then Jeff, if you want to jump in with the Reds answer, and I'll give my thoughts. Sam, what one thing between now and the end of the regular season do the Cubs need to do that will give them the edge to be the winner of the National League Central?
Reverse the script in close games. If they could find a way, because the Cubs also, the crazy thing about that 15, I think now 16 and 24 stat in games decided by 2 runs or less, that's 40. That's not that many games when you've played 100 something. The Cubs have blown a lot of teams out. They're good at that. Finding a way to win games just like Thursday night against the Reds. I know it's kind of a cliche answer. Well, if you win a lot of close games, but I mean just win enough of them, and I think they will find a way to at least stay in this as long as they possibly can. How do they do that? The biggest thing is just can this bullpen continue to grow? I just said that they're not a weakness. Can they turn into a legitimate strength? Can they, for the last 2 months of the season, can they go out for out with the Reds bullpen, which has been really good all year, and the Brewers bullpen, which feels like is good every single year?
I think for the Reds, it all relies on hitting on, I'm going to say 4 out of 5 of these injured pitchers that are coming back need to be good. I think that if you're talking about multiple, especially if you're talking about both Green and Lodolo, either coming back and getting re-injured or coming back and not being the good part of themselves, then the Reds are going to be in a lot of trouble. If you can get Green back, if you can get some of these bullpen arms, like if you can get TJ Antone back, if Vladimir Gutierrez can come back and be a bullpen piece, if you can get Casey Legumina. I know that Casey Legumina is not near as established as the other guys, but he showed a little bit of talent there in his very brief stint early on this season. You're going to be talking about a deeper bullpen. You're going to be talking about a more talented starting rotation, and that has been the biggest weakness of this team. That's why we constantly wanted them to do some sort of pitching upgrade during the trade deadline. And again, as we'll reiterate, the value wasn't there. We get that. But that still means that you need to look within your talented organization that has lots of highly touted prospects and there are a number of them on the pitching side that are close to the major leagues that need to be given a look. I would love to see Connor Phillips in this rotation because I know for a fact he's better than Luke Weaver. There might be an argument to be had that he might be better than Brandon Williamson. And then you also look at Lyon Richardson. Where is he at in this? Is he going to be a starting pitcher? Is he going to be a bullpen piece? These guys have value to the Reds with their potential. Let's turn potential into actual current value.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track there, Jeff. You know, I'm not as concerned about the bullpen, and I'm still going to maintain that guys like Gutierrez, Antone, those guys, I'm not counting on them to show up at all. It'll be great if they do. It'll be icing on some mythical cake that we've been waiting to show up. I don't know, but I'm not going to rely on that at all.
We want Goody, Steve. We want Goody.
I know you do, but we're probably going to get bad Vlad for a few minutes. So let's be careful with what we wish for. I think the bullpen problem will largely take care of itself if we can stabilize what's going on in the starting rotation. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo to show up tomorrow and go 8 innings of shutout baseball. Now that'd be great, but that's not necessarily what I mean. What they can't continue to do is run the Livelies and the Weavers out there crossing their fingers going, I wish I may, I wish I might, they would get an out tonight. You know, you can't do that. That is not a strategy to win baseball games, but that's what they've been doing since the All-Star break and before. So things are real now. This is no longer look at those scrappy little young Reds. They're kind of hanging around for a minute. This is a stinking pennant race, and it's time to treat it that way. Yep. So you have to make hard decisions. And as much a player manager as David Bell is, it's time to tell Kevin Newman, you're not going to play very much at all. It's time to tell Nick Senzel, you're going to be situational, and that's going to be it. It's time to tell Luke Weaver, clearly, dude, this isn't working. You're never starting again. It's time to tell Lively when he comes back from this latest injury to the bullpen, my friend, you're not starting a game. We're going to do other things. That's what has to happen. Those are the keys for the Reds to remain relevant in this race and actually have a shot to be on top of this division at the end. Because what they're doing right now, it's great. It'll keep them around a little bit. But ultimately, if everybody else is trying harder than you, you've got to do something different. And right now, I feel like the Brewers and the Cubs are trying just a little bit harder, and action needs to be taken.
And one last thing before we get out of here.
Well said.
Gentlemen, Coney or Chicago Dog?
Oh my God, is this even a question?
It's a Chicago Dog for me.
Oh my goodness.
Mustard, relish, onion, hot pepper, tomato, little celery saw.
I know this. It's Portillo's over everything. I got to go Chicago on that one. And on that bombshell, we got to end this one. Thank you so much, everybody, for checking out Locked On Reds and Locked On Cubs. Make sure you make us your first listen every single day, and make sure you check us out as the season goes along, because we will have you covered for your favorite team every day as we are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network.